Hi guys, how are you? How you doing? So yeah, my name's Bill Moorhead. I'm one of the founders of Black Pixel. We're a client house up in Seattle. And last year, my partner Dan Pasco did a talk, and I get to do the one this year. So when Tom asked me to do this and talk about rescue missions, I had this vision flash into my head. And the rescue missions sort of go around this theme. They go around, how am I? That's what they say. How am I? And I'm like, so tough. But when Tom asked me about this, the vision I had was about this movie. This movie's called The Curse of the Golden Flowers. And it's a Chinese movie about an imperial family. And I can tell you that the arch enemy of any member of the Chinese royal family is every other member of the Chinese royal family. I was going to show clips of it, but lots of people die. And I didn't want to show shots of lots of people dying. We're talking about resurrection and bringing people back to life. But there's the youngest son, the middle son, the empress, the emperor, and the one that's kind of falling over is the oldest son. And trust me, these guys hate each other's guts. Somewhere toward the end of the movie, the youngest son stages a coup. He has his armies with us, and he goes to attack the emperor. And they're not very far apart. The emperor is probably standing where I am, and he's looking at him. And his companions go to attack the emperor. And before they get to the emperor, these ninjas drop from the ceiling, do ninja-tastic things to all of them, except for the prince, because that's what ninjas do. They do all this stuff. And I didn't want to show you the bloods and all that sort of stuff. But when they're done with it, they all bow to the emperor and then jump back up into the ceiling. And then he has to deal with his son. So my first thought was, I want ninjas from the ceiling. I want these guys to drop down, take care of everything, and then bow to me, give me the stuff back, and then jump back up. Oh man, I love that. My second thought was, actually thinking about it, I was like, oh, that's cool. My second thought was, that's what we do sometimes. I know the word ninja gets overused, but we're the guys that jump in front of the customer, the emperor. We deal with this insurrection, and then we give the app back to them, and then we jump back up in the ceiling. I mean, I can think of 2 occasions where we haven't done that, and we've done a lot of rescue missions. And I was talking to Tom about this, and he's like, well, can you give me an example? So, a true story. Actually, I had a writing teacher early on that says every true story is a love story. I'm going to let you be the judge of whether or not this is a love story. But this is a true story. And all of these rescue missions, all these true stories, everyone starts out the same way. Starts with this line, I kid you not. Give it to me straight. How am I? And, okay. So we have this client. Let's call him Bill. I decided to choose my own name. He actually has 2 L's. I have 1, so you guys can make the distinction. But I wouldn't actually call the client by his real name. So let's call him Bill. And Bill calls at 9 a.m. on Monday morning. And he says, I need help. I said, okay, what's up? He goes, well, I got this app, and I'm not sure it does what it's supposed to do. Can you guys take a look at it? And we're like, sure. When did you want it in the store? And he's like, it should have been on the store on Friday. Good to know. We'll have the guys look at it, give a little code review, and we'll meet back in the afternoon. So Bill calls back 4 p.m. that Monday afternoon. And he says, give it to me straight. And we have to say, I have some questions. Before I give it to you straight, I have some questions. And this is the question I hate to ask, but it's the question I always ask. And sadly, it sets the tone. It's one of these questions. Well, what is this app supposed to do? I have had it for less than a day here, and so we're still kind of figuring out what it's supposed to do. And he's like, well, this app takes a picture of a piece of paper and then sends it up to our servers and using the API we provided. I'm like, you wrote the API. That's good. That's good to know. I can talk to somebody about that. But I have another question. Was it 1 image or 2 images? Because it wants to send 2 images up, and we can't figure that out. And he said, oh yeah, he wants to take the front side of the page and then take the back side of the page. Good. Okay, so that makes sense. That's what the app tended to want to do for us, and we got that going. But I do have one question about this, because we couldn't figure this out, and we looked and looked and looked, and it didn't make any sense to us. Why does it require Skype? And I hear this, like, we're on the phone, he's back east, and we're in Seattle, and I hear this thing, I can hear this sort of like clicking, he's like, what? No, it doesn't require Skype. Why did you ask? I said, well, I'm going to send you something in the mail here, and because we found this it over the place. It wasn't just one place. This thing was all over here, and I'm going to show you something. And so up here, in the first thing, it says, please enter the email address of the last 4 when you registered for Skype, and it may take a moment. We'll talk about this in a bit, but this was very indicative of this app. It takes a moment. Bill is still quiet, and then he starts saying the letter F. He's going to say this word, but he's sort of stuck on F because he's still looking at this piece of paper on his screen. And while he's doing that, I'm going to sort of pause over and talk about Black Pixel. This is our motto: solid, useful, beautiful. Actually, I like to use the word delightful. It's a better word for me, but beautiful. And I have a team of engineers that I adore, who are awesome. They do great work. They support each other. They think about this. They want the craft to be beautiful. They want to make beautiful things. Dan and I both believe in the power of design. You guys were talking about design, but we've bitten this bug big. In everything that we do, we talk about design. Design helps our budget. It helps know when we're done. It helps a whole bunch of things. We're big design freaks. We have some people on our design staff that we have UX and UI and people that make art. We have artists and all that sort of stuff. And we have a group of testers of QA that I'm in awe of. These guys find bugs that I would have never found. Their motto is, we don't break things. We dispel the illusion that it ever worked. And they're for hire. If you guys need work, please talk to me about these. These guys will blow you away. There's 2 brothers, the Block brothers, that talk about doing QA stuff, and these guys have bought into the Block brother principle and cool stuff. But I actually want to talk about this because they all looked at this and they wept. They were crying. They couldn't actually verbalize what was bothering them. The engineers were looking up at the text and how the hell do you get it to be over here on this side? It's hard to do. Mostly the text wants to format itself down and you get things cut off on the bottom. How can you do that? And they're like, about stuff. Our designers are kind of like spinning the wheels over the capital C in council and the lowercase c in continue. And my God, it's a blue alert, blue alert. They're running around and doing this stuff. And our QA person, I think they've gone into, they get lost at that word loose. It says, you will lose any information you've entered. And they just do this. In fact, all of them have this on their desktop, and one of them takes it out once a month just to look at it and count the number of errors he can find in this picture. But they're all stopped and they're all weeping because, well, Bill's gotten to the letter U, and he's still looking at it. And then it finally hits him. It finally hits Bill, and he actually doesn't get to the letter C. It's been about 2 minutes with F and U, and he asks a very insightful question, and it's what my folks were like spinning their wheels trying to figure out, where did we get here? What happens when you tap one of those buttons? So this message came about because they clicked on the cancel button up in the left corner. And they don't know whether or not the cancel will cancel a cancel button or continue it, or the continue button to cancel the button or continue. They just don't know. It's actually, we have a little book of things to do and not to do in the company. And our lead designer, Phil Letourneau, actually wrote this down as an example of what not to do. What's the expected behavior in that part? It's not really obvious, but I'm going to quote my lead QA person. He said, "Whenever the buttons are tapped, the app crashes," which at this point is the behavior I expected. We didn't say how Bill was, how it's good, but I think that says it all. So it's like, okay, now we talk about next steps. Once we've actually broken the news that your baby is ugly and it can't crawl and all that sort of stuff. So this was actually pretty positive. Bill was an awesome, he still is an awesome client. Notice this is me talking, this is not Bill. The guys have actually got the app running. They have it taking 2 pictures and they have it sending it up to your server. We don't know about the return codes. We need some documentation about that, but hopefully you can have that sort of stuff. And I'll send you a build of the app and you can play with it. The designers want some of the artwork to tweak. We don't have the original artwork. All right, we'll take what's in the app and we'll do that sort of stuff. But that's sort of the next step, and we'll talk tomorrow. Okay. And then we're back to one of those questions, and this was from Bill to me. And it's one of those questions I was just dreading. I'm like, no, don't ask this. I can hear it over the phone. You're going to ask me this question. You really are going to ask you this question. And I know we made fun of this through this conference, but Bill says, will you take a look at the Android version? And we don't do Android. Actually, at the time of this scenario, the story, we didn't. Black Pixel was an iOS-only house. And it wasn't for religious or fanboy reasons. Dan and I had done a lot of BlackBerry development. We saw the fragmentation. We saw the different carriers with different Java engines, with different screen sizes and different input things, and we're just like, we were done. And when Android started doing the same thing, we were like, we'll let it settle down a little bit, you guys. We don't want to do that. So, we don't do Android. It was honest. It wasn't. And then he said the thing you can't do. Please. So, all right, we'll talk tomorrow. We'll have a game plan for the iOS side, and then we'll talk the Android stuff. The Android version. Okay. The Android version was supposed to be just like the iOS version. I know that was the design statement that was given to the developer because the Android version was screenshots of the iOS version with invisible buttons over where the button should be. Which on the various devices looked horrible to atrocious to like, I can't even read this. And the buttons didn't line up on any of the things. And I managed to scrounge up 5 devices in that evening, and it crashed on all of them. And that was it. That's all it did. It didn't use their API. It didn't do anything. That was the totality of the Android app. And, you know, I didn't do Android. I didn't know enough, but I got enough running in that night to see it. There literally wasn't anything there. And so, you know, Bill calls, 9 a.m. Tuesday morning. Give it to me straight. And I say no. And he doesn't hear me. He's like, welcome, and I'm like, no. And he's like, there's silence on the other side, and I'm like, no, you are. And I tell him what this is. And, you know, we've worked out a deal to do the iOS app. It's not going to be in the previous Friday's app store. It's going to be a couple months out. We're going to do this. And we've worked this out, and then he says, we want you to do the Android version. And we don't do Android. And then I say, look, you came to us because of broken promise. Someone said they could do all of this stuff, and they didn't. They broke your trust. And I'm not going to promise you something I really can't deliver. And Bill says, we trust you. Which is, it's funny, but that's what they did. You know, he had talked to his bosses. His bosses saw the app, the iOS app that we got up and running in one day, and they liked it. It did what it was supposed to do. We were enthusiastic to help them. We wanted to help them, and they were afraid to go somewhere else. And they trusted us. And I said, okay. He said, we trust you to do the right thing. Okay, I'm going to have to go outsource this because I don't have anybody in-house that knows anything about Android. He said, yep, that's what we expect. And so the kind folks at Martian Craft loaned us one of their Android developers, and after he stopped laughing at me, he taught me a lot about how to do Android stuff. And so these days we do Android stuff ourselves, but I really appreciate Mike's help on that. But this is it. This is the definition of a ninja as far as the emperor is concerned, right? Emperor has something he says forth, and he absolutely trusts the ninjas will do it. And usually it's ninja things where they kill people and stick them, that kind of stuff, but he needs to have that trust. And so this is what we do. And it's a really big part of this exercise. I don't know, I started counting, I lost track about 30 of these rescue missions that we've done. And most of them are repeat customers after that. And that's what you want. You know? But, you know, Charles Babbage and Alan Turing are my heroes, so I don't, why? But why? Why do we actually, you know, how did it come to this? And so I have thoughts about it. You know, of those 30 things I counted, all 30 of them had this as a root cause. Lack of money. You know, they give us what we want, tell us what they want, and we say it's going to cost this much. And they say, well, we have this much. And by the way, everyone else quotes us half of what you quoted. I'm like, yeah, but we've done this. We've put hundreds and hundreds of apps in the App Store. We've done this. We know how to go from the beginning to the end. We know all of that work. I have super talented works, and you'll be happy with the result. It costs money. We know this. I said, but yeah, we only have this much. Okay. Actually, there's two exceptions to that rule. They had more money than anything, so that's a different cost. But the other thing is they can't cut their scopes and features. We want to do this much, literally. We don't have the money, but we want to do this much. And, well, we say you have the money to do this much. Like, yeah, but we want to do this. And I'm like, well, when we stop and think about it, the minimal product to do what you want is this much. If you go to here, we'll work with you. And usually it's like, no, And like Amy's company, we see them 6 months later. Like, oh, we spent $8,000 on this and it's not what we want. Like, $8,000 doesn't go as much as it used to. How am I doing, time-wise? What? A little late? All right, I'm good. No, it's not good. I had more stories to tell, but here's my Black Pixel, Billet, Black Pixel, and Bilm, and thanks you guys for laughing with me. So.
And you think he's joking about the ninjas, but you should see Daniel Pasco handle a sword. Seriously, I'm not joking about that. All right, next up we have Steve Dorico. Putting out fires, I assume.
Thanks, everybody. Hear me? Microphone works? All right. I'm Steve Dorico. I'm the founder and lead iOS developer at Bixby Apps. We do mobile app consulting, primarily iOS, and we have seen our fair share of disaster projects that have come to us by way of an overseas developer or poor maintenance on the App Store. So we've had clients come to us to solve their problems. And today, I didn't want to talk about one of those stories, but what I really want to talk about was the tool set that we use to solve problems at Bixby, right? So I wanted to sit down and give everyone access to our methodology, so after this talk, you'll be able to solve problems with the same exact steps that we use when we see a crisis or a disaster project. So before we get started, just want to give you a little more background on myself. I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan. I grew up in an engineering culture, but it was not software engineering. It was mechanical. I love cars. I grew up working on cars, and I had the chance to work on the robotics team in high school. It was a great merge of mechanical and software engineering coming together. First Robotics, if you guys haven't heard about it, it's an amazing program where high schoolers get to build 130-pound robots, go around the US and compete on a soccer or football-sized field to do different tasks. So this is where I first got my intro to software, and I fell in love with it. So I went to Grand Valley State in Grand Rapids, Michigan, just on the other side of the mitten, and got a degree in computer science. I was lucky enough when I graduated to get a job offer from eBay. So I moved to Silicon Valley, and I worked inside their network operations control room. This is the hub of eBay. It monitors all infrastructure, all bids, all listings, all activity that's taking place on the site is monitored in a room about the size of this auditorium. There's graphs, there's charts, there's clocks, there's a crisis war room. All of these pieces of infrastructure are set up so that we can monitor, as engineers, the site and come in and triage issues, fix them, or prioritize them for fixes later. After working at eBay, I left. I started my own app development company, Bixby Apps, and I lead the team on iOS and do all of the fun founder things. So like I said, today we're going to learn about a few different things, primarily our problem management techniques, the tips and tricks that we think fill all the gaps that a textbook might not tell you. And then I'm going to recommend some reading. It's typically some really easy, light reading, most of the books you've probably heard of, and we'll wrap up. So I'm sure some people in here know this, but this is a law or principle called Pareto's Principle. And it states that 80% of effects come from 20% of causes. So in software, if you're having issues with your application, that means that 80% of the symptoms come from 20% of the code base. So there's some quick wins here. Right off the top of the bat, let's not be overloaded on what's in front of us. So let's sit down and try to tackle the first easy 20%. What can we fix so that 80% of the symptoms are gone? And when you keep this principle or law in the back of your head, it helps to prioritize the issues that you have while you're trying to triage one of these disaster projects. So the next thing I want to talk about real quick is really simple. What are apps? Apps are just systems, right? They take input, they produce output for some given task. In between the input and the output, there's processes, right? Different steps that have to take place. And if you have a broken process, you have a problem. You have a bug. So what we really need to manage is our process. So when I worked at eBay in the network operations control room, they taught us a system that allowed us to solve bugs and make sure they stay solved. Because I'm sure everyone here has written a fix for a bug or a patch, and maybe that really wasn't the final solution, and it came back a few weeks later. So every single day when we came into work, we got a list of the prioritized bugs from yesterday that weren't critical. And we were trained in a technique called Six Sigma. Six Sigma is a methodology that was created by Motorola in the 80s. It was created for their manufacturing process. And the goal of this methodology was to produce a manufacturing plant that would have 6 defects for every 4 million items produced. Think about the efficiency there. So the guys at Motorola had this as their goal, and they came up with a system to constantly improve their manufacturing process. This was in the middle 80s, early 90s, and Jack Welch, former CEO of GE, got wind of this. And in the 90s, he took this system and implemented it at GE. He became a champion, and it fermented. It took the GE stock as a blue chip for the first time ever. There's been over $470 billion saved over the last 20 years using these techniques. And it's not just limited to manufacturing. So here's a few of the companies in the Fortune 500 that use it internally. 70% of the Fortune 500 use techniques from Six Sigma. So at the core of Six Sigma is a technique called DMAIC. It's an acronym that stands for 5 steps. Okay, there's 5 steps here that we're going to walk through really quick, and we're going to try to keep it a little abstract so that we can implement it in any situation that we see. So the first step is to define. You need to define your problems before you try to solve them. Make sense? Define what scope, what limits you have in front of you that you can't control. Is there a time frame, a launch date, an advertising push? Are there people we can't move? What are the walls? Where can we go? Where can we not go? Define the scope. What are the problems? And set your goals. So after you define it, you need to measure your current process. Take your disaster project, assess it, look at the code base, see how bad it is. Quantify how bad it is. So the way that we could do this in software is to track key metrics. Maybe the login button doesn't work consistently. Well, how inconsistently? Is it 70%? Is it 4%? Is it 99.9%? Let's quantify that. So go through your application and find key aspects that need to be measured. These are going to serve as your control once we're finished to make sure we actually made some improvements. After you collect this information, you're going to want to analyze it. You sit down and you're going to try to look for correlations and relationships between the requirements you set up front and the data that you've collected. For instance, the login screen. We're going to look for bugs that we know are coming in through our ticketing system and maybe the metrics that show this isn't converting 100%. Look for code to bug, bug to metrics. Look for these kind of correlations. Sometimes they're obvious, sometimes they're not. But you're going to use those correlations in relationships in the 4th step here, improve. Now the key to improve is to try again. Optimize the current process based on your findings. Implement a solution. It doesn't have to be perfect. You want to see progress. That's what you want to see. So you're going to test this. You're going to test it again, and you're going to compare it to your controls that you've captured up front. So write new code, rewrite the old code, test it. Make sure you try again. And then finally, when you've found a solution that meets the needs, you're going to ensure that those needs are continuously met. You're going to do that by implementing tests and monitors, using benchmarking and software, right? We'll set up tests, continuous monitoring, dashboards, and alerts on our key metrics. So if an application is out on the store and it's operating for one of our clients and something goes wrong, our dashboard in our alert system lets us know. So we know whenever our key metrics slip up. These are the same things that eBay does in the network operations control room. They have an estimate of how many bids there's going to be at any given minute. They know exactly how many listings will take place at noon versus 6 p.m. So compare that to the data you have and try to find a trend. So the last thing you need to know about DMAIC is it's a continuous cycle. Iterate, try again. I think we've heard it all week. But this is a circle. So define your problems, measure, analyze, improve, and then control. And when you're all done, find another problem and solve that. This is how you tackle a mountain or a disaster of a project. You prioritize and then you chop away at it. You're not going to do it in one swoop. It's going to take many iterations. So this is the technique that we implement at Bixby Apps. They use at eBay and with 70% of the Fortune 500. Maybe it's not with software development, but they use it in their manufacturing, maybe in their accounting. All different departments can apply these process improvement methods. Okay, so there you go. There's the heavy learning, the textbook definition. Here's the things that we think stick out that really make this stick. First and foremost, communication. Think about the way that you communicate with your clients and your team. The way that they interpret the words is all that matters. It's not the way that you intended them. So if in a chat or an email you say something that could have maybe an implicit meaning versus what you explicitly meant, you don't know how that message is going to be conceived on the other end. So sometimes it's worthwhile to hop on a quick FaceTime, Skype, Google Hangouts, whatever, and communicate with video. That way you can see the other person, you can speak faster, you can type, and it'll save a lot of time and you'll communicate more efficiently. The next key is to have a reusable code base that you can have on your hip at a moment's notice. When you're in a jungle of a disaster of a project, your reusable code base is your machete. That's your rock. That's how you know that when you're in the middle of this mess of a code base, you have classes that will establish a connection for your in-app purchases. You have classes that will do push notifications. You have reliable code that interfaces with your core data. All of these things are your tool belt. You need to have these. These are reliable. Otherwise, you're just wandering around the jungle. So have a reusable code base that you can use for every future project. And start thinking in abstract models when you're writing. Hey, am I going to write a login screen more than once? Chances are yes. What can I reuse for next time? Does it mean template out every single piece of the application? No. But save yourself some time and have something that's reliable that you can use going forward. And your clients will love the savings on the time. I think I've already spoke about it. Iterate. Make sure you try again. Don't be scared to fail. And we love to do the heavy lifting first. Just like if you're moving into a new apartment here in wonderful San Francisco. If you move into the 5th floor, are you going to move the bed first? Or are you going to move the microwave? There's no elevator. You're going to go up and down those stairs 50 times. So heavy lifting, like maybe connecting to that wonderful API that they say works perfect and is documented thoroughly, that might be something you want to sit down and tie down the very first day. So these tips and tricks, along with the DMAIC process, are what we use to go through the jungle of a disaster project. If you enjoy any of these techniques or anything that I spoke about today, you're going to want to read The Lean Startup by Eric Reitz. This is the Six Sigma principles applied in startup culture. He uses some different words. He has some jargon that's a little bit different, but at its core, it is Six Sigma. It's a very popular book, and there's even some venture capitalists here in the area that will recommend to their entrepreneurs that they read this before funding. Rework, the great guys at 37 Signals, thought leaders, not only with Ruby on Rails, but how to run a software development team. If you haven't read Rework, the book will read in a weekend. And I challenge you to pick this book up. It is one of the most influential books that I've read in the last 5 years. Really highly recommend Rework. And then if you enjoy business, finding success, working with clients, check out Jack Welch, former CEO of GE. His biography is called Winning. So like I said, my name's Steve Dorico. I'm the founder and lead iOS developer at Bixby Apps. We're a consulting firm here in the city. We have work available. If you're interested or you're looking for work, jobs at Bixby Apps, or feel free to come tap me on the shoulder. I really appreciate your time, and here's all my contact information. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Steve. Okay, next up we're going to have Marcus Zara. And I've already heard a fair amount of Marcus's rescue stories over drinks at a number of occasions, so this should be pretty interesting. Marcus.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Seems like all three of us are approaching this question in a different way, so this is mine. Most people know who I am. Most people know what I do. They know that I'm on Stack Overflow. I answer a lot of questions. I solve hard problems. But what they're surprised to learn is what I actually do at my company. I'm in sales. I am in the position of acquiring new clients. That's what I do, which if you know me personally, that'll probably make you giggle. And I do that through bailouts, through horror stories, and fortunately, every once in a while, I'll do it in a situation of somebody going, we're going to start an app, we would like some advice. That's my favorite way to start a conversation. Unfortunately, it very rarely happens that way. Usually it starts similar to Bill's with, how bad is it? So I'm going to run through a couple of different stories and lessons that I've learned from it and my approach to this. With the whole concept of, generally they're coming to us 6 months later, just like the excellent talk before ours. So the first one's the easy one. We've all heard this story. We had an intern. He was a summer intern. He came in, and we thought it'd be a neat idea to have him work on an iOS project. It's been in the store for a year now, and it's having some problems. I've heard this one many, many, many times. And of course, the obvious lesson to learn there is don't do that. But there's another lesson here that I've learned with dealing with a client is to identify that audience. When I first walk into a potentially new client, they have an existing code base. It works or it doesn't work. It's on the store or it's not on the store. When I'm walking into that client, it's like, okay, who actually wrote this? Because the last thing you want to do when you're trying to explain to this client how bad things are is to find out that you're speaking to the guy who wrote the code. Done that. So you want to kind of feel it out and find out who wrote it. And the intern example is pretty easy. It's like, okay, you intern, prototype, got it. We've all done it. These horror stories date back, to the beginning of computer science, and probably before that. Probably some of the first warships were built by interns. So this is an easy one where you say, okay, well, your intern was learning, and we can tell the stuff that he did at the beginning, and we tell the stuff that he did at the end, and the stuff that he did at the end, we can definitely use. The stuff that he was learning on in the beginning, we got to throw away. We're looking at about an 80% code rewrite. And that one's pretty easy to swallow, that one. They're like, okay, that sucks, but I get it, I understand it, that's fine. But you've identified the client. The worst one is coming in going, you're sitting down in front of the guy who wrote it, and it sucks, and you need to tell him that his sucks, and you want to be able to keep the client. It's the whole goal there. And once you've identified that, yes, the person who wrote it is sitting in front of you, and the last thing in the world he wants to hear that is his code is crap. So a couple ways to do this. These are all based on true stories, by the way, things that I have done in the last few years, client situations I've run across. So in this particular one, ironically, it's a client up in Bill's neck of the woods. The guy who wrote the code was sitting in front of me. The app had been on the App Store for a year and a half. Very successful app. We're talking multi-million user application. And it was running really slow. Of course, core data was at fault, so they brought me in to fix core data, because core data is always at fault, right? And of course, I was able to identify that, yes, you do definitely, absolutely have a core data problem here. But I was able to also approach it in a way of going, yes, core data has some of these limitations. You were thinking of it as a database. It's not really a database. I'm sure we've all heard that spiel. And you've hit a wall. Not your fault. You didn't know that wall was there, even though it's 10 feet tall and 100 feet wide. You didn't know it was there yet. Now you hit that wall. We need to re-architect to get around this wall. Not your fault. You were a coder. You did a good job, but you've reached the limits of your original solution, and now we need to come at it from a different direction. And that tends to work, because you're not hurting anybody's feelings, and you're still telling them that, yes, we need to re-architect some of this stuff. And in the cases like that where the existing coder is still there, you want to work with them, you want to educate him, you want to teach him, you want to propagate forward so that he never does this again, but also so that you also get him into your court, because now he's your best friend because you're making him look good, and you're educating him at the same time. And it's a really good approach to be able to do that with the coder still in there, versus the intern where you go, yep, he was an idiot, glad he's gone. We're going to rewrite this. RM-RF, okay, starting over. In this case, you're going to go, okay, now, core data, we've run across this problem. All of your entities are inheriting from one entity, and your entire database is in one table. There's our problem. And it's core data's fault. Core data's limitation. It did not leap out at you and blink the screen and scream saying, don't do this. So yes, core data's fault. We're now going to re-architect this part of it. And it's got a ripple effect. We've got to re-architect a few things around it and a few things around it. And a couple months later, now we've got a really nice running system, and it's better than it was. And now we have that developer in-house as part of our team. He likes us, and he's going to recommend us to go forward. And either we're going to look at the next version where we say, okay, we're going to do more refactoring. Because Apple has improved things since this was originally written in iOS 3, and now we're in iOS 5. So let's take advantage of some of that stuff, and we're going to do some more refactoring, and we're going to clean up more things. Not lying to the client. This is all these things are absolutely true, but we want to get the client to accept the fact, and this developer who's still on staff, accept the fact that we need to refactor, and we need to improve things. So a couple different ways to approach whether the original coder is there or not. And that's kind of what we want to attack. We want to identify that. Otherwise, you can get escorted out of a building really quickly. That's a story for later. Another one. This is one of my favorites. And this one actually fits more to my personality type. Another client. This one, unfortunately, is a former client. And we were brought in, New York-based client, and fairly quickly within the project, we were able to identify that there was the personality situation there was we had a lot of chiefs, and we were the only Indians, and they were all staring at us in a circle. Further to that, all these chiefs had one big chief above them, and he didn't like to hear the word no. Or more to the point, they were afraid to tell him no. So when they came to us and said, we have a delivery date, we haven't done the design yet, but we know we want all of these features, and this is how much money we have to spend. And of course, we're like, okay, pick two. No, we can't tell him that. If we tell him that, the world will end. We have to make this work. That is an interesting situation. And a lot of them were like that. And in that case, I actually got to have fun because I recognized that there was this fear, that there was this person, this nebulous person that I actually never did get to meet. But I kept asking to go meet him. So, okay, I get it. You don't understand this. It's a very technical discussion. Let's set up a schedule meeting. I'll go in, I'll talk to him, I'll lay it out. I'll take the heat. You know, I will be the messenger. I will be the one who gets shot. And I'm pretty much volunteering to lose my job. I will take this thunder from him. And all of a sudden they'd back down and like, oh, well, maybe we can move the scope around. And, yeah, and all of a sudden things started moving. And I was like, that was interesting. So we move along further, and then a little while later we run into a decision of what color is the icon going to be. And we had 4 different shades of blue to pick from, and none of them could decide. They're like, well, I don't know, because they were afraid of being wrong. They were afraid of going back to him, and him going, wrong color blue, you're gone. So they wouldn't make a decision. And I was like, let's try this again. I picked periwinkle. Moving on. And I didn't even tell them this. I just said, picked it, and we kept moving forward. A couple days later, who picked that color? I don't know. But we're on schedule. And they're happy that they were on schedule. And they're like, I didn't have to make the decision. And if he comes down and it's the wrong color blue, not my fault. And we kept going on and on and on about this. And there was project managers involved, and it was a very complex structure. And after a couple of months of this, again, we're just making decisions. If they couldn't make one, we would pick one. Sometimes we would literally pull out a coin and go forward. And then the project managers kind of caught on to this. So when the project managers got stuck dealing with the upper management and couldn't get the upper management to make a decision, they go, well, you know what? I got an idea. Let's call Marcus in, and let's get his opinion. And the first couple times, they're like, yeah, let's do that. And I'd come in and go, no, this is stupid. We're going to just do this. This is obvious. We're going to move this, do this one, and I'd leave again. Because now I've built up this armor. It's like, hey, you're not firing me. I'm just going to keep doing this till you do it. And after a few times of that going on, they actually started skipping that step. So now the project managers say, let's bring in Marcus. No, we'll go with option B. Because I would generally, when I come in, I would pick the worst option. It's like, oh, background color? Fuchsia, of course. What other color would you use? Yeah. So they would start realizing that I was picking the worst options. I had horrible tastes. You know, they didn't know that I was picking the worst option on purpose, but I had horrible taste. And all of a sudden, this thing started moving forward and forward and forward. And I labeled this, and I'm probably not the first person to come up with this phenomenon, is I was the bulldog. I was the pit bull that they kept me chained up in a leash, literally in a conference room, and they would pull me out and air me out every once in a while to make sure they remember who I was, and the project manager could actually get things moving very, very smoothly because of this fear of this person who's going to come in and go, he's going to make a decision, and you're not going to like it. So you might as well pick one and take your best shot, because the one he picks will get you yelled at. Yeah. So that was another situation. We ended up being able to rescue the project by simply doing that, by making decisions. Sometimes intentionally the worst decisions in the world, to get people comfortable with the idea of, I will take the heat. I'll take the bullet every time. If there's bad news to give to somebody, I'll line right up and give it to them. Because I'd rather get fired now for giving him the bad news than getting fired 3 months from now for doing a crappy job, any day of the week. I have that reputation of, I am, the jerk. I am the guy who will give you the horrible news. Unfortunately, usually in the worst way possible. I'm not really a politically correct person, so tend to be bad about that. My job, my passion when it comes to software development is the data layer, the networking layer, the persistence layer, whatever you want to call it, that nebulous back of the cabinet. And this is part of a quote from Steve Jobs. Hopefully everybody knows this. If you don't, I recommend reading up the interview that it came from. But the idea is that a master craftsman will not put plywood on the back of his cabinets. That the back of the cabinet will be just as high quality as the front of the cabinet, or it will eat at him. It will fester in the back of his soul, because he knows that he put cardboard and staples on the back of that oak cabinet, and it will drive him crazy. I live in the back of the cabinet. No, I'm not in the closet, but I do live in the back of the cabinet. That is, everything that I do, all the code that I write, and that I just live in and that I work and I tweak on and I'm saving nanoseconds here and there, no one ever sees that code. Not a single user sees the code that I write. I don't write UI. I'm not very good at it. I'm passable. But I write networking code. I will spend days and days and days on a piece of code to save you 2 seconds. That's where my passion lives. And the reason I bring this up is that a lot of the horror stories that I get, a lot of the bailouts that I get come to me because like, hey, core data's broken, can you come fix it? And I see some shocking, shocking code. And I roll it back and go, okay, how did we get here? You know, it's not going to change the price, but I would like to know so that I can understand so that if I'm ever heading down this path and I see these same thorn bushes, I know where it ends up. And it invariably ends up going, well, we got a great design. We hired the designers. They nailed it. It was awesome. We started coding the front end. And then the network stuff, we just kind of threw it in there as we ran across it. It's like, yeah, okay. And then that is a very, very common theme because nobody sees it. It's the back of the cabinet. Nobody cares about it. They'll build the doors. They'll design the locks. They'll put the top on it, and they'll decide on what varnish they're going to use. But in the back of the cabinet, they're like, whatever. You know, whatever's got laying around. You know, I think I saw a milk crate back there. Use some of that. And I see that a lot in code bases. And I see that in apps all day long. Not even the ones I work on. I just downloaded the new game from EA, Dungeon Keeper. Love it. I'm a big fan of the original Dungeon Keeper. But every time you launch the app and it comes back from resume, it crashes. Why? Network problems. Every time you go to do an in-app purchase, it crashes. Why? Network problems. Because they didn't think about the networking problems. And a lot of people don't. And I come in and I was like, oh, look, you got networking code everywhere. Think about the back of the cabinet. And if you're designing a new application, the back of the cabinet is just as important as the front of the cabinet. Because that app right now is just getting destroyed on Twitter and Facebook because of all those crashes. And it's a beautiful game. The UI is fantastic. The interface, the interactivity of it is really, really well done. But the back of the cabinet is killing it right now. So think about that. And if you're coming in to bail out a project, look at that back of the cabinet. It's ugly. It's going to be ugly. If they called you in, they know they've got a problem, and chances are that's where the problem originates from. They might have UI problems, horrific ones like Bill was describing, which seared my brain. But they're guaranteed to have networking problems. I have never run across an app that had a crappy UI and a great network, except for mine. I've never run across a client application who had a crappy UI and a good networking code and a good persistence layer. It's always the other way around, or both. So consider that, and when you're doing a bailout, just explain to them, going, yes, this is, it's not user-facing code, so therefore it doesn't tend to get on the deadlines. The project managers don't tend to be too terribly aware of it. It's just this other stuff that nobody really understands. It is nebulous, and since nobody can really see it, we can't really test it, and therefore it really gets missed. So you approach the client with that going, this is normal, this is common, it's unfortunately normal. And that, yes, we have to refactor it. We got an 80% code rewrite. Why? Because your UI was only 20%, and actually you were doing a lot of networking stuff, and it's all wrong. But that's, again, come at them straight. Tell them that it's straight, but expect that. When you're coming into it to do a code review, look at the back of the cabinet first. That way, you've seen the worst. Everything else, I guarantee, will be better than the back of the cabinet. Last one I want to talk about, outsourcing. And I giggle at this one because that's what I do. I am an outsource, but what I refer to specifically here, not necessarily offshore. And I'm not referring to, look how bad these coders they hire for 2 cents an hour. We've all been there and done that. Anybody who's older than 20 years old remembers the last time we were here. So I'm not really going to preach on that side. But there's another side of it that's a little terrifying that I'm starting to see more and more right now. And we're getting these in bailouts, and we're getting them, fortunately, in this one case that we're going on right now, before the bailout. So we were approached as one of a list of, 5 or 6 vendors to bid on this project. There was a marketing company who approached us. The client is theirs. The marketing company designed the app. And then they approached us to do a bid. And they told us there's 5 others. And we're good friends with this marketing company. We're good friends with this agent. And she was telling us, she's like, everybody else is below 100. But with the success we've had with you guys in the past, if you can bid around 150, I can probably get you in because I know you guys. I trust you. You know, you do good work. It's like, you can go ahead and bid a little higher. So she's actually giving us a budget. And we looked at the app and we're like, there is no way we can do this for 150. I'm talking 150,000, not $150. And just to clarify, she was fortunately talking about 100,000 and not $100, because we've had those come through. And we were looking at it, it's like, okay, our first pass at a bid on this is 400,000. And our lean pass, because we tend to do the first pass and go, okay, if everything they tell us is a lie, how much is the bid going to be? Okay, and if everything they tell us is the truth, how much is the bid going to be? And then we tend to do kind of a median in between there, because we know there's going to be some lies, and surprisingly, there's going to be some truths. And we finally came back to him and said, okay, look, this is what we found. We've done this research online with this stuff, and the business that you're in. And we actually spent quite a few days. We wanted to make sure that we weren't being stupid, because we knew everybody else was below 100. We couldn't figure out how. And we said, like, okay, the minimum viable we can do is 250, and here's the list of caveats that we have that are assuming that these are all truths and that you didn't really mean all this other stuff. We can do 250. And they're like, well, thank you very much. That's too high. We expected that, but we finished the bid anyway because a good relationship with the marketing company. And the marketing company came back and said, yeah, they picked this company that bid 10,000. Okay. And we laugh. Yes. Every once in a while, kind of like a quarter landing on its edge, those work. We had a company who bid with us. We bid 50,000 or so on the project. They found someone to do it for free. Free. And it worked. It was a beautiful app, and we were shocked. The business model was terrible, and it didn't last very long. But the app was beautiful. We couldn't fault it. We're looking at it like, wow, if this is the future, we're hosed. Fortunately, free doesn't happen very often, but the low bids, every once in a while, you'll get a low bid, and it'll ship, and it'll be just right, and it'll line. This was not that case. They haven't started coding yet. This is a live, I'm changing names in certain situations to protect the guilty, but this is actually happening right now. This is an ongoing drama right now. They haven't started coding yet, and they've already told the client, the developer has told the client, you need to hire X, Y, and Z services. You need to pay for these services to complete the application, that we need to use these cloud services. And based on your expected user count, these services are going to cost you $1.2 million per year, on top of the $10,000 that you're paying us. The designer came back to us and said, they're saying that this bit over here is really, really hard, and that it's physically impossible to do this on an iPhone, and therefore they have to do it in the cloud. Could you bid this for us? And we bid it, and we're like, yep, that piece right there, oh yeah, we already bid that. It's right in here, this section here, $36,000. We can have it for you in a few weeks. Huh. Okay, go back to the client. Client comes back and said, well, we can't fire them because we have an 80% cancellation clause. And we don't want to waste the money. And if any of you are familiar with the sunk cost equation, this is it. And you can use the sunk cost equation to your advantage, by the way. But in this case, this was like, it was like, wow. And to the point where they were actually flying the designer out to meet with their in-country salesperson with a one-day notice, and it's costing them like $2,000 to fly her out there to meet with this stuff. And we're baffling at the numbers. So at this point, it looks like we're going to end up with a client. But it's something to be aware of, that when you're in the situation where you're bidding, and you're bidding against a low bidder, ask them questions like this, going, have you asked them how they're going to implement this? Because I can tell you how I'm going to implement it, and I can bore you, or I can give you an orbital level discussion of how I'm going to implement each one of these pieces of your application. And be honest with them, going, there are horror stories out there. There are demons. There are truly evil people. And ask them to ask the other ones the same question, going, hey, I may not get this bid, but this is why our bid is this high. And maybe they haven't answered these questions. Maybe they don't realize that you don't have a server yet, and that they forgot to bid that part. And be helpful to the client. Be absolutely honest with the client, and just tell them, going, there's a really big delta between our numbers, and I implore you to do some due diligence on this. And you might be able to just pull them back from the edge. If not, you'll see them in a few months. And then you'll have to deal with the sunk cost equation. But there's really, this is not the first time I have seen this scenario of, we will do it for nearly free as long as you hire these other 3 companies. And oddly enough, they're from the same city as I am. I'm not sure if there's any, maybe that's just a coincidence, or maybe it's just, it's companies they know and work with. But there's some really odd things going on in that space. And a lot of and I wouldn't say a lot, we do a lot of bids, so to me it seems to be a lot. But it's a common enough phenomenon when someone's trying to hire an outsourcing company and they get a really low bidder. And this, I used to do construction law. I was a paralegal in construction law a couple centuries ago. And this happened in that field as well, where you have someone come in, and the government back then had to take the lowest bidder. So you'd come in and you bid projects for roads, and the lowest bidder would come in and they go, oh, you wanted those paved. Oh, well, that's a change order. So something to think about, something to feed, to try to rescue back projects, pull them back from the brink when it comes to the outsourcing side. So turn it back over to Tom. Yeah, thanks, man.
All right, thank you very much. So I believe we have a little bit of time for Q&A, so if you guys would come on out. Marcus, I was thinking the Bulldog story, you should really call that terror-driven development right there. If you scare them enough, something will happen. So I imagine people have some questions about this. I don't know where the microphones are, though. So, there's one. So the first thing that came to mind for me, though, for all of you, though, is it seems to me that with iOS apps, you get a lot of people wanting apps developed who are not fundamentally software developers, have no experience in that field. So as a result, they focus entirely on the front of the cabinet because they have no idea what the back is like. Now, does this sort of match up with your experience with these companies?
Yeah, almost all of the time. Often they come with an idea. Often they've drawn out the idea and they have some paperwork for it. They usually don't have an iOS designed app, but they haven't thought about the back end at all. That's just not in their purvey, and it's the education process that we have to do all the time.
It's not even necessarily that they're not technical. We've got a couple of clients that are technical, and we came in, they're like, we know when we want to ship, and we don't have a design, and oh, by the way, we need to rewrite our server while we're shipping this. Can you do that? And they really have no concept of what iOS development is. Even though they're technical, they're still like, oh yeah, we built this app in PHP, but now we need a new API, so we're going to rewrite the whole thing in Ruby while we're doing the 2 months of development on iOS, okay? So it's not necessarily even just technical. It can even be a technical company, a tech company, and still be completely blind as to what's involved with iOS.
So then even if it's just a case where they have no native app experience, that can be bad enough?
Yeah. That can be bad enough, yes.
Yeah, we like to relate it to writing a book. A lot of the clients that come to us, they think they have the last chapter or the first chapter written, and they just don't know how they're going to connect the two. And we like to tell them about the transition or the character development, the plot, how we're going to tell the story and develop this application so that's something you can invest in and rely on instead of just a surface or a short story that doesn't have complete development.
So what exactly was Skype used for?
What?
What was Skype used for?
Actually, it wasn't. It was a boilerplate that the developer put in all of these things. It wasn't anything to do with what was going on. So it was confusing to the client as well.
One recurring problem I've run into is with where they've gotten especially very, very cheap bids and the like, and then I have to rescue it, is licensing. Have you run into it a lot? And how do you unwind? I've often had this trouble of then unwinding all the things they've copied from all over the place and stripped the licenses from.
For us, we tend to do a lot of searching for it. Generally, the people who do that don't really actually cut out the licenses very often. Or they'll leave comments in, which is always nice, because comments are useful. Yeah, and comments also tend to be really good signatures. So you can, we tend to, when we see things like that, it's like, here's some really nice code wrapped around some really not nice code. I'm going to copy and paste this comment into Google and see what I get. And when we run across licensing issues like that, then to us, that's good news. Because now we have an actual quantifiable, legal, actionable reason why we must refactor this. So while it's, we're still in a horrible, horrific situation, we now have another bullet in our gun, if you will, of why we must refactor things. But we're Google. We use Google a lot. Google, Tineye, if you're not familiar with it, tineye.com, really good for copyrighted images. Those happen. That happens just about as often as copyrighted code, as well. And yeah, we'll Google around a lot for that stuff while we're doing the code review.
Yeah, we do a code review, and that's one of the first things we do. We try to identify all of those. We actually have a list, so there's a signature to a lot of them. It's part of the process.
Yeah, method signatures, the comment blocks at the top of the headers. There's usually something that will distinguish enough so we can get additional information and find out what's going on with the license.
We've answered all questions in the universe.
Completely.
Yes. Oh, we win.
I'm curious if you've ever encountered a project just so bad that you didn't want to bail it out, that you just decided it's just not worth, not like the client's like, we'll pay you whatever you want, but you just realized it was such a horrific situation that you weren't willing to subject yourself to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Turns out, this is really cool, you can fire your clients. And it seems really odd, but you can. Your contracts usually allow you to get out of it. And they may not like it, but sometimes it's the same as smooth for everyone, including them.
Just like to lay the situation out to the client. Sometimes with these disaster projects, they don't understand how bad it is, and we kind of relate it to totaling a car. And usually when you get in a car accident, you're surprised on how fast the damage adds up and how quickly your car can total. So we lay the situation out and let them make the decision for us.
We battle with the sunk cost equation. I swear we should put that on our logo. We run across it a lot. And in one situation specifically where we walked away from a bid where they said, we have a truck of money, fix this. We came to them and said, we need to rewrite this. We literally need to delete this. Not only that, but we need to redesign it because the design is terrible. And they're like, no, you must reuse it. Okay, well, we're just going to give you this bid anyway, even though you've already said no. Here's how much it's going to cost to write this from scratch with us designing it and us coding it, and it's going to take us 6 months. If we use your code base and your designs, it's going to take us 9 months, and it's going to cost us 3 times as much.
Yep.
And they turned around and said, we'll take option B. And at that point, like Bill, we're like, here are 3 people I recommend you to. We're not interested. We are unable to take this project at this time. And just said, and we had to say no because I knew that yes, we could have done it. I would have lost people. They would have literally quit and walked away because the guy who code reviewed it, and he said, if you stick me with this, on this rewrite, because he was part of the bidding, he's like, if we do this bidding, don't give it to me. He's like, I won't do it. It was that bad. I mean, that was the one I was telling you about last night with the parsing the XML every time you wanted to access a data point in the XML.
So they're so determined to hang on to what they've got that they won't save money to start over then?
Nope, they wouldn't even save money. They wouldn't save money or time because we gave them shorter time, cheaper, everything. And still no, we're going to hang on to it. We've already spent money on this. We're willing to just pour more behind it.
That's pretty scary, but in a way I'm not so surprised. Okay, anyone else? Okay, I think that we're done now for this one. Thanks guys very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.